Hello, my name is Gabby Richardson, and you are listening to The Nexus of Narratives, where we use stories to bring people together across belief systems. New episodes are released every Monday on your favorite podcast platform, where I have a conversation with a guest about an obstacle that they faced in their life that invited them to take a look at their beliefs, whether about themselves or about the world around them. We talk about how those beliefs were formed and how formative moments shape how we interact with the world. The Nexus of Narratives is what we will uncover through this story exploration. It's the common thread that unites all of us, no matter what our beliefs are. If you are an avid podcast listener, you know the deal. Please take a moment on the platform where you are listening to rate, follow, and review. Those little acts go a long way in ensuring that this important work reaches more people. Instead of doom scrolling on social media, follow the Nexus of Narratives to add some connection to your social feed. Check the show notes for links to follow the Nexus of Narratives on social media, access bonus content on Patreon, connect with me, connect with today's guest, and see any content warnings. All right, enjoy this story. Hello. Thank you for joining the Nexus of Narratives. I'm Gabby, and Baily, I'm so grateful to have you join. Unfortunately, due to the situation that is Southern California at this moment, we've had to reschedule a few times, which makes me even more grateful to see you and have some of your precious time and know that you're safe. So
thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, just what I'm so excited for what this is going to uncover. And we were connected by someone that I had met on a virtual networking, and she had said, "Hey, you need to meet Baily." And I'm so glad that we both dove into that, because what a wonderful experience it has been knowing you so far, even from a few states away. And I just want to invite you to introduce yourself however you would like to do that.
Well, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Rachel Rosen, for doing that intro, because she obviously knew what she was doing. When we got on our first call, I think we probably had 30 minutes scheduled, and it went at least an hour, maybe an hour and a half. And it was just very indicative of, I think, the connection that we've been able to find with each other very quickly. Our overlap is very wide, which is cool. So speaking of that, that's a good segue for me. I am Baily. I'm a connection strategist, speaker, workshop facilitator, writer, but I call myself a professional friend maker, because for the last decade, that's effectively what I've been doing in any job I've ever had, whether it was events or business development or partnerships or community building. It all has relied upon me leveraging my relationships with other human beings to achieve our goals together. And I just think that's one of so many applications of connection with other human beings. Obviously, it helps in your career and your work and your business, but it's absolutely every part of your life can be benefited from deep connection with others. And so that's my work now. I help people effectively feel less alone in this world and figure out how to, as I told my then 4-year-old nephew when he was like, "What do you do for a living?" And I said, "Well, I help people make friends and figure out how to play nice together." And that's effectively it, right? It's like I help people understand how to connect deeply with themselves so they can identify what their interests, goals, values in life are, so that they can better connect with others in a way that is aligned and reciprocal, not one-sided. And, it's, I think, the greatest work of my life, and I love it so much. So I'm excited to get to talk about that and everything else that we cover today.
And whatever that might be. Well, I think that's just so perfect. And I remember when you first told me that you've kind of coined yourself a professional friend maker, I was like, man, that's genius. I want to steal that, but I'm not going to.
Have it. That's yours. Have it. There needs to be so many more of us in this world, in this moment.
I mean, isn't that the truth? Yeah. Whew. We could opportunities, more connections, more reaches, more friends, more compassion, all of it. Absolutely.
Yes.
And with that, I think what a beautiful segue to the entire purpose of why I started Nexus of Narratives is whatever story you feel fit to share and wherever you would like to start. I want to just open it up to you to set that stage however feels right for you.
Well, when I was thinking about this question, I'm 40 years old, so I feel like there have been so many moments in my life where everything changed, or suddenly I became aware of something, or I became aware of, a program that had been running in the background of my brain, it still surprises me every time it happens and delights me every single time, because it's like, oh my God, that was there the whole time and I had no idea. And then the moment you see it, and the moment you shine a light on it, it's suddenly something that you get to make a choice about. Okay, and I'm being very fluffy here. So what I mean specifically for the listener about this is a moment where I'm like, oh my God, this whole time I have been putting on this perfectionist persona, or I've been, shape-shifting my personality to fit what the person in front of me, what I thought they might want me to be, so that I can feel accepted. And this is a recent realization. I kind of started to discover that as I was getting closer to 40, it felt like I was becoming more and more like myself. And I didn't even really know what that meant. And it just felt like true. It felt like, oh, I'm feeling more comfortable saying what I really think in this scenario, or not, bending my interests to match the person I'm talking to just so that they like me more. There's been this pervasive thing in my life for as long as I can remember, where I just wanted everybody to like me. I just wanted everybody to accept me and not reject me and like me. And I think that's not at all unique to me. Many of us, if not most of us, probably feel the same way. Yeah. But I wasn't overtly aware of it. And then as I started seeing it and becoming more aware of it and kind of investigating that, it shined a light on a lot of other pieces of my perfectionist tendencies, my overachieving, my people pleasing, all the things that I've done throughout my life that I thought were just me being an ambitious person, and somebody that wanted everybody to like me. I thought that was a good thing. Like, of course, you should want everybody to like you. Why wouldn't you? The goal, especially as a woman, is to be palatable and likable and acceptable and fit into whatever mold anybody wants her to be. So this felt really important. And, it's really only been the last maybe year that this has been rolling around in my brain. But now I can't unsee it. And I'm very excited for that, because I think what comes next is going to be much more aligned and truthful to who I am as a human being and who I could be if only I removed all of those masks that I've been wearing. And I'm really excited to see who she is, because I feel so much less tied to other people's approval, because I am approving of myself more and more every day.
Oh my goodness.
I don't know if I answered the question, but
well, I'll have follow-up questions for you, but what a beautiful way to set the stage for where you're coming from. And certainly something that I resonate with, that I've been grappling with for years. And even though that has been a point of my own growth, is I consistently find other areas of my life where I am being less authentic to be more likable. Mm-hmm. And that has been huge for me. Even on Tuesday, I was in a workshop. It's a speaking class that I'm in. And it's all about how I can be more effective with aligning my presence with my language when I'm speaking, so that I can be most effective with that alignment. And so I was doing a test, like mini speech, which I'm very used to public speaking. I'm very used to being on stages. That's not a new thing for me. And especially I have felt, being a person who can captivate an audience, who can have very clear points and takeaway messages, who can make things actionable and engaging and positive. And I did this, and what happened was I was sitting in a space with the person who was coaching my small group is someone that I am looking to shadow under to train to be a trainer for a personal development company that I'm working part-time with now. So I put this pressure on myself that, oh, I know it's no coincidence that she's leading the small group I'm in, because I've made it very clear that I would like to train under her. And so I had put myself out to be more just everything as I'm presenting, because I'm almost like my legs were shaking. I was nervous and I wanted to come across as perfect. Now, the story that I was sharing was a deeply vulnerable one about feeling like I'm not enough and overcompensating to be a high achiever, and learning that if I could simply convince myself that I'm enough to start with, whether I achieve these gigantic goals or not, then I could live a much more powerful life, I think. And this is a very recent realization. But because of where I was at in the moment, the way I was presenting it was, and if I felt like I was enough, and I'm like watching myself be this really like peppy, articulate, overly animated person talking about a deeply painful topic. She's like, Gabby, can you just like have the music match the dance? What are you like in a very polite way, like, take the mask off. And I was like, I thought I was. And then I watched the recording of myself and I was like, oh, yikes.
Yeah, it sounds like you were fully in your head instead of being anywhere near your body. I literally just came to the realization of like what embodiment actually means, because I've heard the word forever. And it was always one of those like, yeah, you embody it, right? It's like fold in the eggs or whatever, right, from Schitt's Creek. It's like, no, embodiment means your head and your body, your mind and your heart, all of those things are in the same place at the same time. One is not 20 feet ahead and one is not 20 feet behind. It's like, no, you're in this exact moment fully. And no wonder I didn't know what it meant, because I've basically never done that for the bulk of my life. So that word alone, you know, kind of entering my personal lexicon has been huge, because now I'm like, am I embodied in this moment? No, not even kind of. Like my brain is so far ahead of my body that my body's like in a totally different zip code. And nothing is authentic in that moment, because those two, there's no coherence between the two. And there needs to be, for whatever comes out of your mouth to be true. And so, yeah, that's such a practice though, because being embodied also feels incredibly dangerous sometimes, because I have an emotional intelligence coach that I've been working with monthly for 7 years now. And our very first call, he said to me, do you have a problem telling the truth? And I was like, excuse me, sir, how dare you? I'm the most honest person you will ever meet. And that was true, but so was what he said. And over these 7 years that we've been working together, that comes up all the time, where I'm like, oh my God, you had my number from moment one. I have not been telling the truth for the bulk of my life, not about facts and things that happened, but about who I am and what I believe. And, that coherence between head and heart, that embodiment was not there, because as a kid, I didn't feel safe for it to be there. And so I never allowed it. And so once we started unpacking this truth-telling thing, I came to realize it was about me. I wasn't telling everybody else the truth about me and what I really think and what my values were, because I wasn't even telling myself. And so there's been this whole discovery with that. And embodiment feels like my trigger in a good way, like my positive trigger. Like if I can say, hold on, am I embodied right now? If the answer is no, then I need to shut my mouth until I get there. And if the answer is yes, then proceed.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And so there's something that you said that really stood out to me that I would love to dig more into, is you had mentioned when you first started sharing, before I shared my little bit, that there's sort of this like societal pressure that you had felt as a woman to be whatever it takes to be likable. mixed with something that you had just said that stood out to me around it not feeling safe to be that authentic. Like when you say embody and just describe embodied, I think authentic and aligned, as you had mentioned, between like your mind, body, heart, words, beingness. So could you share some like specific stories of where you learned that wasn't safe? And then maybe what was one of those pivotal moments or a series of pivotal moments where you were like, oh, wait, no, it's actually really important that I am this and I practice this.
There were a lot of the moments that taught me that it wasn't safe to be embodied. And of course, they come from childhood, but also growing up as a girl in this world. I have also recently come to the realization that everything I'm talking about is my version of the fawn stress response, right? So the stress responses we hear about are fight and flee, right? And there's also fawn, which is you kind of just make the dangerous person or situation you're in like you enough that they're not going to hurt you. And that's always been my way. And I had no idea this was a thing. I didn't know this was what I was doing. I didn't know this was a stress response until like really within the last few years. And when I first learned about the fawn stress response, I was like, well, duh, why wouldn't everybody do that? Like, I'm not going to fight most likely, and maybe I'll flee, but I'm not going to make them like me less so they hurt me more sooner. Like, and the way that this has played out in my life has been, I mean, always with men, to be honest, like always in circumstances with boys or men where I'm 5 feet tall, I'm a petite woman. My bite is definitely, or my bark is definitely bigger than my bite. And so I've always had this sense of like, not powerlessness, but not really bodily autonomy, right? People since I was little have been picking me up. That's what people do to little, like small girls, is they pick them up because it's, oh, I can pick you up. People love it. But on some level, it was always very frightening because it's like, I can't do anything about this. Somebody can just pick me up and toss me over there if they want to. And that's that about that. So I learned from a very early age that I needed to almost like manipulate whoever was scaring me or putting me in some kind of danger, or even if it was as you know, easy as like a fellow teenager picking me up. I needed to make them do something else by making them like me, being very charismatic, being very like jokey about it, like lightening the mood so that it didn't get too intense or too serious or too scary for me. So I've always been incredibly good at like lightening the mood, throwing in a joke, being witty, like, you know, making them feel safe with me. And that's played out in like scary situations, but also social situations, right? It's like if I'm in a group of people that I don't know, as a means of protecting myself, I'm going to make people feel very safe with me and very comfortable with me, because then you don't typically harm somebody that you like or that you feel likes you. And so it's just been this bizarre thing that I've done my whole life. But honestly, one of the key moments for me growing up, so my dad is an alcoholic. He's long since been in recovery, but for my early childhood years, he was an active alcoholic, and he was never a violent alcoholic or anything like that, but he had a major temper and he could just fly off without much, right? And my dad's like 5'8", so he kind of has short man syndrome. And anytime somebody would like aggravate him or upset him or make him feel belittled in any way, he would be incredibly aggressive verbally. And my dad and I share the ability to be very quick and very witty and also very, very cutting. And he would kind of be like that. And so as a small child, like, you know, anywhere between 3 and 8 years old, I always felt like I needed to diffuse the situation. And so I got very good at making the mood lighter or distracting him or whatever. And so that just kind of became the default setting, I think, in my mind, is like, this is how you relate to people. I definitely have hypervigilance, which is being aware of so many different things all the time at, all the different stimuli, all the different people, all the different moods, the different energies, the different everything. Not unrelated, I just was diagnosed as autistic a month ago. I have a son who's 5.5 who was diagnosed as autistic when he was 3. And since then I've been going down the rabbit hole and realized like, oh, hey, wait, apple tree. Anyway, that relates because part of being autistic is having hypersensitivity to various stimuli in your environment. And so it's all very much mixed up together for me. But I learned very early on that I need to predict what's going to happen next, which means my head is always 10 to 20 steps ahead because it's on the lookout, right? It's checking for danger around the corner. My heart and my body are over here just trying to protect ourselves. My brain is planning. My brain is checking for danger ahead. And so, of course, they weren't ever together. And so, yeah, of course, as an adult and as a woman growing up, we didn't even talk about the societal expectations of women, but it's the same. Why on earth would my body or my brain feel safe ever being embodied when that is not how one survives in any way? So I have a lot of compassion for myself as I'm learning how to do this, because it goes against everything I have experienced in my life to be embodied and to feel safe enough, not making people like me. That's a huge ask. And so, yay me, I guess.
I resonate so much with it, which is something that's fascinating, especially the hypervigilance. Now, I'm not 5 foot. I'm 5'4", 5'5", depending on the day. It's
giant.
Always different. I'm so tall. But when you said, when you were describing what I experienced as sounding like a feeling of helplessness, mm-hmm. and that the hypervigilance kind of comes from a feeling of helplessness, like I'm evaluating myself as well as you're going through this, because I'm like, wow, I feel like I can relate to a lot of this. And I'm like, I wonder if that's part of the reason why I really love weightlifting now. It's like, I've become the person who can pick up and throw people now. It's like, don't pick me up.
Just get consent first. Just get consent first. That's all I ask everybody.
And I think the diagnosis that you mentioned of learning more about autism and kind of experiencing that and what sounds like very new that you're learning about yourself. Was there sort of this like aha moment for you around this like feeling of safety and, oh, I've had to chameleon myself for so long, so now I would like to be different? Or was it just something that you sort of had realizations over time and put the pieces together over time?
It's been within the last 2 years, and I can't say there was a specific moment, but there was a domino of realizations that kind of kicked off. And part of it came from, I also had this discovery of myself, about 1.5 years ago, maybe 2 years, that I'm actually bisexual. Went through my whole life not really acknowledging that. And that also had a domino of realizations that went with it. But when I finally came to that realization and owned it and like announced it, because that's how I process things, is by talking about them, it kind of paused me and made me realize, like, what else don't I know about myself that I actually know about myself? What else am I keeping slightly out of my periphery because I don't have time to deal with it? And actually, in my conversations with my emotional intelligence coach, shout out Jake Martin, many times I have said to him, I don't want to talk about this right now. I don't want to deal with this right now. I don't have time to deal with this right now. I don't have time to pick this scab. I don't have time to go down this rabbit hole because, again, once I know something, I can't unknow it. And I'm forever changed at that point. And that isn't always convenient. It's almost never convenient, because why would it be? Right. And so when I came to terms with my bisexuality, that started making me look around the room, right? Like I'm looking in one direction at one wall and I'm like, okay, what's behind me? That's clearly 1 foot away from me, but I can't see it because I don't want to, because I don't have time for it. And coming up to 40 was also one of those moments, because I know that for years I've heard, oh, when you hit your 40s, you have less fucks to give, or you just care less about what other people think. And I was like, what changes? How? I'm very curious about this. I want to know, like, this sounds great, but why? Why does this happen? So I think I was just more aware and more open to seeing what I hadn't been seeing before. But honestly, the like safety and security thing, I started writing more about my experience of perfectionism and achieving and, you know, being a gold star seeker for the bulk of my life. And through my writing about it, I had some realizations. And then I started recording my podcast episodes, Seeking the Overlap podcast this summer, in summer of 2024. And in those episodes, I'm interviewing people thinking I'm teaching my listeners about how to connect with other people, because I already know how to do that. I've been doing that my whole life. And in these conversations, I started realizing that actually I was connecting with people very one-sided. I was letting them feel really connected to me, but I was not feeling connected to them because I wasn't giving them the true me. I was giving them who I thought they wanted me to be. And when I started investigating why that was, everything that I said earlier in this conversation started coming to mind. And it was like, oh, holy crap. Okay. And reading books like Burnout by Emily Nagoski really helped, because that helped me realize how much of my natural behavior and patterns and personality were a burnout response too, and also causing my burnout. It was this cyclical, awful cycle. So I just stopped wanting to live that way. And I once I was able to acknowledge the why behind the behavior, I chose at that point to say, okay, these are the reasons that I have chosen this way of being subconsciously or whatever. I get to choose if I want to keep doing this or if I want to try something different. And I was very open to trying something different. And so it's been a process, and the autism diagnosis is very recent, but it makes me feel less insane about all of it. And it's like another layer of like, well, of course, you silly goose. How else could you have existed, right? Like, this makes perfect sense. And you get to do something different now. So it's been a series of moments and an ongoing investigation. And for me, a lot of it is writing, and I go on self-talk walks where I record myself kind of having a conversation with me. And that helps me work through a lot of my hangups or blockages or things like that. I kind of do internal family systems therapy on myself a lot, just asking why, like, why is this the way that I do it, and what could have caused this? And that really helps me get to the core of it all so that I can just decide what to do with it next.
That's so cool. Self-talk walks. I like that.
It's very helpful.
Maybe
for
another
verbal
nugget that I'll
processors.
take for myself. I've done a couple of those. It was actually more of like processing some of the conversations that I've had on here. Last summer, I would go for a run and I would have my headphones in. And then I was just like, as I was running, panting and processing the conversation that I had had the day before. And that was really cool. And like listening back to it, even through the panting, was really awesome. Like just thoughts that were flowing. So if I actually do that,
that's cool too. Like for me, part of my processing of emotions and my thoughts is movement. And so that's why these are always self-talk walks. I don't sit in my office in a chair and talk to myself. That feels crazy for some reason. But get me out on a walk, and that's totally normal and fine. And I'll tell you, I take it one step further because I have spent most of my life knowing and not doing. I'm a rabid consumer of knowledge. And so I read a lot. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I'm always taking in new information, but I don't always implement it. That's sort of the problem. There's a disconnect there. So as a means to helping myself implement the realizations that I have had on these self-talk walks, I will copy and paste the transcript into ChatGPT. And I have a little prompt that I made up for it, which I don't know the specific language of it right now, but effectively I say, summarize this, give me every key point I mentioned, pull out any metaphors I used, and tell me if there are any next steps. And so ChatGPT then presents it back to me. And it's like, here's everything you talked about. Here are the stories you shared. And here's what you can do next to do something with this. And for me, it's really helpful. And I think that's why I've been able to move through a lot of things much faster, is because I'm not just digging it up and then leaving it there with dirt all over. I'm like digging it up and then taking it and putting it in a new pot in some respects, and then doing something with that and cleaning up the dirt so that it's a nice clear space again. And so, yeah, so you might, if you're going to do the self-talk box, I recommend the second half of it too. It's really helpful.
Yes, I like that, because I do appreciate a good, okay, now what are you going to do with this information? And how are you going to utilize it for positivity and change and transformation?
Yeah.
Don't go anywhere just yet. We will be back with this conversation in just a moment. Thank you so much for spending your time with me here on the Nexus of Narratives. As you may know by now, it goes a long way to support the podcast by listening, following, rating, and reviewing. So if you have enjoyed the content, please take a moment to support extending the reach of this important work. While the public episodes of the Nexus of Narratives focus on the stories of our guests, how belief systems have been formed, and how to build connection, we keep the conversation going on Patreon. We've built a phenomenal community of peer connectors on Patreon who are looking to build a more compassionate world together. While I could be continuing the conversation with a guest or digesting fantastic themes with my dear friend Rowan, there is a lot of great bonus content on Patreon, including additional benefits for different tiers. Search Nexus of Narratives on Patreon or click the link in the show notes to join this exclusive community. I look forward to connecting with you there. For more information on the Nexus of Narratives, ways to listen, opportunities to connect with me, or share a story of your own, go to nexusofnarratives.org. I personally monitor that inbox, so it is a quick and simple way to connect directly with me. Whether you're a new listener or have been around for a while, I'm deeply grateful for your time and commitment to this work. Without keeping you any longer, let's get back to the story. Beautiful. Beautiful. I love that. I'm going to take that and put it in my pocket too. And
all yours.
So with all of these realizations, something that you had said stood out to me. And I hear this a lot with people is, I don't have the time for that right now, especially as I'm sharing now that I work for a company that does personal and professional development, and we have different classes and workshops that we offer. Often I'll speak with people who someone has invited them to speak to me so that I can share more about the class or the programs. And I often get a response of like, I just don't have time for that right now. And I'm like, does anybody have time for anything ever? Mm-hmm. No, there's never it's never like a good time to just like, let's go ahead and open up this chest that we've allowed to collect dust in the back of our heads for the last however many years. Oh, this seems like a wonderful time to just like open all of that up and not know what's going to come out of it and what kind of implications it'll have. It's never a good time.
Right. Right. That's the tricky part. It's never a good time to grieve. It's never a good time to be sad or to be lonely. It's never a good time to deal with your shit. It's just not. There's no such thing as a good time, because here's the real trick of it. If you're waiting for the conditions to be perfect, so let's say you reach that day where the conditions are technically perfect to deal with your crap. You think you're going to interrupt that lovely moment with some trauma grappling? Because no, you're freaking not, you liar. Like, if you're being honest with yourself, absolutely you are not. You're not going to be at a sunny day on the beach with a, easy breezy book in your hand and a delicious drink by your side with not a cloud in the sky and go, oh, things are so calm and lovely and nice, and you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to unpack some family trauma. That sounds like a good idea. No, you're freaking not. So you need to deal with it when it comes up. And look, the fact of the matter is, emotions are very much energy, and you have to deal with them when they show up on your doorstep. You can't say, I'm so sorry, can you come back another time? I'm busy right now. It doesn't work that way. And actually what happens when you do that is they don't go away, but they like climb underneath your house and they dig into the ground below your house, and they're there. They're just lurking below the baseboards. They're always on your mind because you don't forget that they showed up on your door. You might shove them away and be like, nope, not dealing with this. You can disassociate only for so long. And I hate to break it to you also, but disassociation, where you're letting those feelings and emotions and the hard stuff just bury itself underneath your foundation of your home, that is called trauma. Like, that is how trauma happens. It's stuck emotions in your freaking body because they don't go away. They just store themselves in a less visible spot. And so you can choose to deal with your stuff as it comes up and then move through it faster. Or you can shove it down and let it happen later. And I'll tell you, I got married when I was 23 and divorced at 25. And when I got a divorce, he and I had been together for 8 years, since I was 17. When we got a divorce, I couldn't deal with it. I was like, not right now. I'm not processing this. I'm 25. I need to move on with my life. I need to get on to the next thing, like onward and upward. And so I just didn't deal with it. I just went out every single night. I slept with everybody. I had an objectively really fun year. Don't get me wrong. But boy, was I sad. And I had no idea. I was so desperately afraid of being alone because I had never been alone a day in my life. I went from being a child in my parents' home to going to college with this person and moving in with him right off the bat. So I went from living with my parents to living with him. And then we got married. And it was like we split up, and suddenly I was living in an apartment by myself. And that was the most terrifying thing I could have ever thought of. So I didn't think about it. I just was never there. And when I was going through this divorce, you know, I was working at this company that I'd been at. It was embarrassing because all the people that I worked with had like gone to our wedding and like, you know, contributed to our honeymoon fund. And then a year and a half later, I'm divorcing him. And it's like, oh, sorry about that, guys. There's no return policy on those presents. And, you know, I was having a really freaking hard time and I just wasn't showing it. So I also probably looked a bit like something. I'm sure people had their judgments of like, oh, wow, she got a divorce and she's just carrying on as normal. Well, it didn't hit me until like 2 years later. I had moved from Florida to Los Angeles in that time and effectively started my life over. And the grief hit me much later when people no longer had compassion and they no longer felt like it was the appropriate time for me to be breaking down about this. And so there is also that factor. If you deal with the things when they come to you, if you address the issues as you become aware of them, the external view is also kinder to you, which is annoying and it's not fair, but it's just the way it is, right? People are more empathetic to you when you deal with something as it happens in the moment versus shoving it down and dealing with it 5 years from now when they're like, why aren't you over this by now? So there's a few different things at play. And I'll tell you, there are very, very few positive outcomes of not dealing with something in the moment and not having time to address it. One of those positive outcomes is sometimes you just have to do that to keep going. And that's very real, right? Like I'm in LA. We are week 2. We're week 3 now of fires. And parents are still taking their kids to school. We're still showing up to our jobs. We're like trying to move forward, but none of us have the time and space to grieve and deal with this. And we can't right now. It's just literally impossible because you have to keep putting one foot in front of the other. This will all come for us eventually. Ideally, when we're in a safer mental and physical space, which may never come, but that's the hope, right? And so there are times where you don't have the time for real, but you have to make the time eventually. Otherwise, you will get sick, you will feel unwell, you will feel misaligned with who you really are on the inside and outside. There's no coherence between all of the parts of you. And that is the way I think most people live their lives. And that's why, my theory, so many people are so deeply disconnected from themselves and others, because if they were to have connection with themselves, they'd have to deal with a whole lot of stuff that they're not in the headspace to deal with.
Amen to that. One thought that came into my head, which could be a conversation for another time, is I think you and I might actually be the same person.
suspect. What am I trying to say? I had a feeling that might be the case.
There were some things that you were saying that I was like, okay, it's not like 100% that, but it's like 97% that for my life. So that's weird.
Well, and I wouldn't be surprised if right. But that's the thing, like this shit is universal, right? Like this is actually universal. We all just have a different viewpoint of it. It's like we're all looking in the same house through different windows.
I love that analogy. I love that. And as you were mentioning, if someone was to say, okay, I don't have time to deal with this, so I'm going to like shove it. As you mentioned, there are certain times where it's not safe to open up or unpack any of that. But if it doesn't feel safe to me because I'm afraid and my nervous system is like on fire versus like, no, there's been fires for 3 weeks and we're just trying to survive here. We really don't have the capacity and infrastructure to face this at the moment. Not that the body knows the difference, but when there are that many, say, critters like that said, hey, can I come in? And you're like, no. And then like, oh, don't you worry. I'm still going to be here. You just can't see me, supposedly. I picture my analogy as like a pressure cooker, where it's like maybe not your traditional like pressure cooker, but like every time you decide to say, not right now, you like hit up the pressure and you don't release anything. And then eventually there is some kind of catastrophic explosion that happens. And if you don't just like say, okay, I'm going to take a little bit of the pressure off. No, instead you're adding pressure on. Then that's when the like, what the heck is going on happens for like the self. Cause I've had those moments. My husband has had those moments, like, and deeply catastrophic that then it's like been years of repair for that big explosion. So it's kind of like you said, you're sitting on your ideal perfect day, you'd be like, oh, today's a great day to unpack some deeply painful things that I have been shoving for however long. But instead to say, okay, here's something slightly uncomfortable. So I'm going to sit with that and work with it, as opposed to having it pile and pile and pile to the point where it feels impossible. And then dissociation and disconnection feel like the only options.
Yeah.
It's not the easier option to just
it's not
push it away.
The problem is it is not the easier option, but it is less gratifying in the short term. And we are instant gratification based creatures, right? It's like, that the better, smarter choice, an easier choice long run, is eating well and exercising and sleeping enough and getting enough water. That is so much easier to do little by little every day than dealing with a disease that cripples you, for a decade of your life, or ends your life 30 years earlier than it needed to. Or, you know what I mean? It's like, if somebody were to say, would you rather do these 5 daily habits every day for most of your life? Or would you rather not do that and have that little bit of time back every single day and, eat the chips or watch the TV or do whatever you're going to do instead? Or would you rather go through grueling 14 months of chemo, or, having this pain or this disease or this thing for like X number of years and then die early? That's not a choice. Obviously, you know which one you would choose. And yet we don't. And yet most people don't. They just push it down the field and they think, well, that's future me's problem. Today me wants this. Today me likes the happy beach day. Future me would be much better off if I unpacked the grief instead. But that's her problem. And I know for me, I have very much thought of myself as so many different versions for most of my life. And the today me is incredibly selfish. The today me is like, who even knows if we'll exist as a society by the time I'm 80? Why do I need to, it's like, sure, that is an option. Or, so it's much easier to make excuses and basically push that off on a future Baily, but we're all the same Baily. And that's the part that I have to remind myself, that like, me of the future will be so grateful to the me of today for dealing with this now so that she can have a better life. And what's interesting, at least for me, is I'm much more likely to say, well, screw future Baily, this is on her, than I am to do that with my kids, right? Like with our children, all I'm doing every day is trying to secure a good, happy future for them. And so the choices I'm making on their behalf are in support of future Archie and Penny. Like, I'm trying to make sure that their future is set for them. I don't really care what happens to future Baily, but those two future people, I am making all the decisions that I can, the best decisions that I can, given the time and energy and resources and information that I have today. But I won't do the same thing for myself, which is just something, isn't it?
It's fascinating. I made a practice of thanking past Gabby when I do something that helps set me up for success. And then I'll like come up to whatever the thing is. And then I see that most of it is done already. And I'm like, oh, thank you, past Gabby.
What a gem she is.
She really crushed it. She really set up today, Gabby, for success. Like, way to go, past Gabby. Yeah. And part of me has had that stick into my head when I want to procrastinate, or when I don't want to do something that I know is good for me, or when I allow myself to get into a space where I just feel overwhelmed by everything that I've committed myself to. And it's just like, okay, just current Gabby, set yourself up so that future Gabby will thank you, because you are also future Gabby. And so
that's such a good visualization, even just like giving yourselves a high five, right? Like, hey, thank you for that. This made my day so much better. That's, I think that's a good one that I'll take from you, because I do have a tendency to think of them as never meeting, right? It's like, well, I'm never going to meet her, so she can't be mad at me. But it's like, what if there's a baton handoff to every version of you, right? And it's like, you need to own up for what you did or did not do on your watch, because she's about to take that baton. And it's like, did you leave her with a mess or with unchecked to-dos, you know, that you said were important? Or did you set her up for success? Is she going to be really grateful to you? And maybe I can like refocus my people-pleasing tendencies to be Baily pleasing tendencies, right?
You're just pleasing new people, and those people are you people.
Yeah, which is so much better in a lot of ways, because I can actually control that, and I can control how that's received, because I'm receiving it and giving it.
Yeah, I love that, because I also think of it like, if past Gabby didn't work out so feverishly during her pregnancy, my postpartum recovery would have been way more difficult than it was. And current Gabby?
Oh, girl, let me tell you, correct. Because past Baily was like, I'm pregnant. I don't need to do anything. I need to sit on my lily pad and just be a goddess. And current Baily is dealing with 2 pregnancies of not being really good about that, still 3.5 years later.
And so this past week, I'm lifting weights that I was lifting pre-pregnancy. And it's like, yes. I never thought that I'd be able to move these numbers again. This is awesome. And I committed myself that I'd enter another strength competition by March. So we'll check in with Gabby.
Oh,
current Gabby's trying to set future Gabby up for success on that one. So we'll see how that goes.
That's amazing.
But yeah, what if even though I was sharing like, okay, past, current, and future Gabby, how can we, work harmoniously? I think the more intentionally I can even think of that, the more I may engage in productive and positive practices for myself as well. Because don't I love a good dopamine hit of like a treat, or, like you said, we're instant gratification creatures, and like we live for those dopamine hits in whatever they'll come from. But so many wonderful nuggets. And just to stay respectful of time, I'm going to go ahead and transition to ask you the same questions that I ask everyone who joins the Nexus of Narratives. Is, if you were to speak directly to someone who can relate to any of your experiences, what might you say to build connection with those people?
Don't underestimate the value of building connection with yourself. And you got to do that in whatever way feels the most aligned to you. And you might have to experiment. Most of us are not up to date on who we are as people today. Most of us are operating off of a list of personality traits, likes and dislikes, values and goals, that is a decade or more old. And that's super normal, but it's also one of the best ways to lose yourself and to attract new people into your life who are not a good fit for who you are today. And I think this does start to happen in your 30s because I started to evolve as a person, and I lost quite a few friends who I assumed would be in my life forever, but they were no longer aligned with who I was becoming. And that, of course, broke my heart in the moment because I hadn't experienced that yet. And now I'm like, oh, that means I was being more truthful to who I was today, not who I'd always been. And it's really hard to break old patterns, and it's really hard to escape the container that people put us in, which is all sort of our perception of their perception of us. If you're really thinking about it, like when I go home to my hometown, I find myself reverting to a past version of me that lived there. And I'm so far past that girl, like light years away. And yet it's very easy to pop back into that container because I assume the people there want that from me because that's what they know me to be. So it's like a container that I've decided they're keeping me in, which it's very dumb when you say it out loud, but it's what we all do. We revert to the teenagers we were with our parents or our siblings. We revert to the girl we were in high school when we're around high school friends, or the college version of ourselves. And what I am asking you to do is to make sure that you continue to get to know who you are right now and who you would like to become in the near future. Because when you do that, yeah, you're going to probably lose some people. And that's okay. That is normal. It still hurts, but it means you're growing. And that's what we're supposed to do, I think. And it also means that you will bring in new people who are like in line with you, lockstep with you in terms of their values and their goals and their beliefs and their interests and likes and dislikes. And that's so much more fun. And it's so much easier to connect with those people when you give them the truth, because then you're allowing them to make the decision of whether they want to be part of your life and have you part of theirs. And I'll tell you, one of the best things about being your most authentic self, which just means the most current version and truthful version of you, is that you give other people permission to do the same. And that might be the first time they've ever felt safe to do that. And like I said, a lot of the time when you know something, you can't unknow it, right? You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. So you might be the awakening that they needed to then do this for themselves. And if that's not a reason to do it for yourself, then I don't know what is.
That was so beautiful. I'm not even going to say anything to that because it doesn't need it. That was just perfection. And to continue on, for anyone who can resonate with any of your experiences, what might you, well, I feel like you already said this, but in case there's anything else you want to add, what might you say to a past version of yourself?
Oh, gosh. Just be so much more kind to yourself. Like, I had so much shame around my people pleasing, my gold star seeking, all of that stuff. I had a lot of shame about it because even though I wasn't consciously doing it, I felt like I was lying on some level. I felt so annoying. Like I would see videos of myself as a kid, or I would think back to situations that happened and just cringe, being like, oh God, you're so annoying. You're so like, ugh. I just got the ick from myself. And I realized it's because I knew on some level that like that wasn't true. And the moments of my life where I can look back and see that I was like showing up fully authentically in that moment, which were few and far between. It was like singing karaoke or performing on stage, or, you know, anytime where like I'm expressing creativity of some kind, that I can't help but be myself in that moment. And so I look back on those moments and I'm like, oh, you are a darling. You are just out here trying to be loved because you don't know how to quite love yourself yet, but you will get there. So that is the past version of myself. That's what I want to say to her is like, you do whatever you need to do and know that you don't have to do any of what you're doing.
Amazing. And what do or did you need to feel most connected to the people around you?
Safety. I needed to feel like I wasn't going to be rejected. I wasn't going to be hurt. I wasn't going to be ostracized or made fun of. And I won't ever know if I would have had that experience or not because I didn't give people the opportunity to show me who they really were. I didn't give them the opportunity to show me if they actually liked the real me. And for that, I am very regretful. And that is something, I don't have a lot of regrets in life, but I do regret not giving people the opportunity to disappoint me. I just assumed they were going to. So I acted accordingly. I complied in advance, effectively, right? I assumed that they were going to disappoint me or hurt me. So I never allowed them to know me all the way. And that includes my own parents. Like, truly, it's like I was such a version of myself for everybody in my life that I won't ever know if I would have gotten unconditional love. And this is the crappiest part of not being yourself with other people for so long is there is this one-sided connection that's going on because I was so good at making people feel comfortable and safe with me. Most people would tell you that they really knew me, that they like, yeah, of course I know Baily. I know her deeply, but I know that they didn't. So even though, and this is, I'll tell a really sad, heartbreaking story in a second, but I spent most of my life never actually thinking anybody loved me or even liked me because I just didn't give them the real me. So I was like, well, sure, you think you like me and love me, but that's only because I've manipulated you into doing that. Whereas now, when I meet somebody new, you're a great example of this. I made a conscious decision within the last couple months of like, when I meet somebody for the first time, I'm going to try really hard to not perform and just see what happens. Right. And it's like, I could have performed for you. And the way that plays out as an adult for me is like, yeah, I have this business and, you know, I know all of these things and I have all these frameworks and like I have this stuff together. Like I look like I've got it together. And I do in a lot of respects, but I certainly don't 100% know what I'm doing. I'm still not making good money in my business. I'm still like striving for success that other people think I already have because I've given that illusion, right? So the sad story, which is a good thing that it came to me, is when my son started talking at like 2.5, 3, he was a late talker. And he started telling me, I love you for the first time. I casually said to my best friend, yeah, I think this is the first time I actually believed somebody when they said, I love you to me. And she's like, I'm sorry, what did you just say? And I was like, yeah, you know, I just have never really believed anybody when they said they loved me before. I'm married, mind you. I've been married twice at this point. I have all kinds of friends. And she's like, I need you to stop and hear yourself. Like you've never felt like people meant it when they said they loved you until your toddler said it. I'm like, yeah, because he has no agenda. And he doesn't know me. He just feels me. He knows that he loves me because he's always loved me. And he loves me because I'm his mom, not because of anything I've said or done to deserve it or convince him to. And when I said it out loud, of course, I could hear myself. And I was like, oh, that feels problematic. So yeah, I think that like being able to be whoever you are and acknowledge that you don't have to do anything to deserve love from the people that are going to love you regardless, opens up this whole new world of feeling seen and received and loved and connected to by the people around you, which is an entirely different feeling than being around a lot of people. And it's way better.
Yeah, way better. Right in the feels, right in the feels. And for anyone who, dare I say, might be listening somehow still and think, this, I can't resonate with a single thing. I have no idea where she's coming from. How can your stories create connection for people who have different beliefs and different experiences?
I hope that it just helps you know that there are a lot of people that feel the same way that I do. So even if you don't, even if you're like, nah, none of that tracks, that's so cool. And I really envy that. But a lot of people like me exist. So move through the world knowing that like this is a way that a lot of people's minds work and hearts work. And I think have empathy for people. I think that's just a freaking good rule of thumb is have empathy and curiosity for people, period. But if you don't feel this way, know that there is a whole other segment of people that do. So just be gentle and try and be a safe person for others to be safe with and feel safe showing up as whoever they are with. So, yeah.
It's beautiful. Yeah, absolutely beautiful. Well, thank you for all of that. I feel like I could talk to you for a whole nother 2 hours. I've had to stop myself from tangents that my brain went on. And then I'd be like, nope, don't do it. Don't do it. Let's stay on track.
It's hard. It's hard. It's hard. You and I are the same, and I'm a dot connector too. And I just want to be like, okay, here's 20 things I want to talk about next. And then those 20 things lead to 20 more things each. And then forget it. We're just never going to shut up. So I appreciate you. Thank you for all of this. Thank you for the really sweet and thoughtful and tender questions, and giving me a place to share any of this, because none of this it's not directly tied to my business, but it's exactly what my business is. In a way, right? It's like connection is the whole freaking thing. But I appreciate being able to have this conversation and share some things that I haven't had a place to share before.
Well, and I'm grateful for your trust in me to share those tender parts of yourself. And I don't take that trust lightly. So thank you again. And if anyone listening would like to connect with you, I will be sure to include any links that you've shared in the show notes. But is there anything else you'd like to share for anyone who'd like to find a way to connect with you?
Yeah, I'm all over except for TikTok. I deleted my TikTok after the most recent shutdown stunt. But otherwise, I'm everywhere at Baily Hancock, and that's Baily with no E. Thanks, Mom. And you can always just go to overlapcollective.com. All my links are there. And yeah, please reach out. If you listen to this and you resonate, send me an email, a DM somewhere, a tweet. I don't do Twitter either, actually, now that I say that out loud. Just say hello, because it makes me feel like my verbal vomiting wasn't for nothing. My vulnerability vomiting.
It was fantastic. It definitely touched me. So I would be surprised if there were other people listening that it didn't touch. Like I said,
well, come
I think
say hi.
we'll have to, at some point, just maybe take another hour or two long conversation just to dig and see exactly how weirdly the same we are. So.
We can play the overlap game. It's a game I have people play in my workshops where it's like they have to find as many overlaps as possible with the other person in like a short period of time. And it's like, what's in our overlap on our Venn diagram between the two of us? And it's a fun exploration.
That would be really fun. Yes, absolutely.
Love it. Thank you, Gabby.
Well, thank you again. Wow, what a tremendous conversation that was. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and I hope you were able to find just as many nuggets of wisdom as well as actionable steps to create connection in the spaces all around you. This is an extremely grassroots production, so thank you to my dear friend Rowan for their commitment to this work in supporting leading fantastic conversations on Patreon and so much more. So be sure to join that Patreon community to enjoy the additional content. And thank you so much to my sweet and talented husband, DJ, for editing the audio and creating the music that is used in this podcast. And of course, it almost feels like it goes without saying, thank you to every single listener. Thank you to every single guest who has committed their time and energy to support what I feel is such important work in bringing people together and creating connection.
Check it out.